to come. So good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to this webinar on school reopening, knowledge and experience sharing for teachers in Africa. We are starting 5 minutes late because of the other Literacy Day celebration meeting is a bit delayed, but I'm sure colleagues will join when that is over. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected our countries very much. Almost all the countries have closed the schools. In fact, 53 of the 55 African Union member countries and entities have decided to close the schools. Now, in March and April, now schools are reopening. And it is, in fact, more important and challenging to reopen the schools because in many countries, this is the first time to open the schools after a prolonged closure. We have many challenges, but also this crisis can be an opportunity to improve our teaching and learning in many countries in Africa. So we have been running this school reopening series since last week. Last week, we had excellent examples from Senegal, where teachers are supported to be ready, but we would like to hear from more countries. So today, we have invited, and then he kindly accepted, Professor Kwame Achampong of Open University to give a keynote on reopening, and Ministry of Education Uganda and Teachers Union from Malawi and also South Africa are going to be shared. Now, a few housekeeping points. While you are attending, please make sure that you switch off your mic and video, and so that we have a maximum reception. We also have a chat box where you can place your questions and comments. Is that okay? So, without any delay, I would like to invite Professor Achampong, Professor Kwame Achampong, to give us his keynote on school reopening in Africa. Just a short introduction. Professor Kwame Achampong, Kwame is an old and dear friend of mine, but also one of the most renowned scholar and practitioner on education in Africa. He started his career in Cape Coast University's Institute of Education. That's where I met him. And then he moved to University of Sussex, where he was a professor and the head of the Institute of Education. And then recently, he has moved to Open University to create a new center for development. So with a busy schedule, he was very kind to come and join us in this important session. So Professor Achampong, please, the microphone is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Yomiko Ikozaki. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this webinar. And this is a subject which is very dear to my heart. So I think when your invitation came, I thought this is an opportunity to share some of my own thoughts. And I think this is a very important time in the lives of many children and teachers right across the globe. And we have an opportunity to reflect and think about how we do education, opportunity to think about how we respond in a post-COVID world. So I think these seminars, webinars are very important in kind of pulling together the lessons and trying to understand how we can respond in future. I want to start by first of all, spelling out just the impact of COVID-19 on educational progress. And I think we should not be under any illusion the challenges we face. It's a challenge for all governments. And this time we are not talking about challenges for educational access or quality for poor, low middle income country. It's a challenge for every government. The educational provision for children at home during school closures due to the pandemic is a serious challenge. But I have to add, particularly for low and middle income countries. Now, there's also the fact that the progress in access to education achieved in the last decade may be lost. And there's a lot of evidence emerging that all the progress that we've made in the last decade, we may lose that progress. And it will all depend on how we respond to this pandemic in terms of providing quality education for children. And this is something that we need to keep in mind. I know that many governments have created opportunities to continue with learning at home. And we hear of several initiatives, which I think are very laudable. Many have relied on the provision of education using radio, television, mobile phones, etc. But we know that given the low penetration of these technologies in many low-income households, children, particularly from poor and disadvantaged backgrounds, will not reap much benefit. So although governments are really doing a lot to ensure that learning continues or reduce the learning loss, unfortunately, the children who are mostly from the disadvantaged background are going to fall further behind. Which leads to my next point, that this means that inequality is likely to accelerate. We know that many students are being left behind, and also the risk of dropping out of school altogether is also increasing. But particularly, this will have a differential impact on girls and mothers. We know, for example, that the opportunities to learn are not equal for boys and girls at home. So when schools reopen, girls are going to come in at a more disadvantage in terms of their learning progress. And this is a reality that would face many schools, many systems when schools reopen. When schools reopen, we are not dealing with learning loss over a short period of time. We are dealing with a learning loss over a very long period of time, with consequences on who would stay in school and who would drop out. And I think another aspect which is not been given enough attention in the discussions around COVID and its impact on education or schooling is the socio-emotional impact. Children, and especially young children, are facing a lot of challenges as they adjust to a new reality at home. We need to remember that the children who will be coming back to school are coming with extra challenges in terms of the challenges their families have faced. Some of these children, their parents may have lost their jobs. They may have had to begin to do some work to supplement or help their parents and extra income. And there are several other challenges that they will be faced with when they come into to school. So we need to keep our eye on that, because that's very important if we are going to make sure that we don't disadvantage them. Another point that we need to stress is that is the budgets. I mean, we are thinking of, and I think this conference will probably talk about it, how do we support teachers? What infrastructure needs do we need to provide? But also we have to recognize that this will have these constrained budgets, the impact of that on schools and extra support for teachers. We know that given the increased need and fiscal pressure, education budgets will likely suffer during and after the COVID-19. So, we have to be very, those of us in education are going to compete for very dwindling resources in each country. So education is going to come under intense pressure as we think of innovations that can address the challenges that COVID has presented. But I have to add, as my next point is that unfortunately, I don't think much attention has been given to the skills and competencies that teachers need to address the learning gaps as a result of COVID-19. There's a lot that is being said and researched, and some innovations about how you support children during the pandemic, but also after the pandemic. And it's almost as if teachers would rise up to the occasion. And I think we will be making a big mistake if we don't think about the needs of teachers themselves. What are the kinds of skills and competencies teachers need in a post-COVID schooling environment? And I think this is an area for professional development, and this is an area we need to seriously look at. And I know that because many countries have been experimenting with different ways in which to support children through working with teachers, there are lots of lessons there for us to pick up. But I think these are the issues that teachers will be confronted with when schools reopen. And I think this should be at the center of our conversation about how we support teachers to be able to respond adequately. Next slide, please. I wanted to show this graph. It looks a little bit complicated, but it's quite simple, really. You know, before COVID, we already knew that the children who are at school and learning were a very small portion of those who were enrolled. So if you look at these two charts, the first one is reference to Ghana. You would see that as children progress through the grades, many drop out, more so girls than boys. The shaded region represents those children who are actually learning as you move across the grades. And you can see that as they move across the grades, this becomes worse. So this is before COVID. Now, if you plot this graph, I think after COVID, you'll find that this situation is even worse. And this is what we were trying to address we've been trying to address in the last 10 years. And if you look at South Africa in the graph below, South Africa manages to keep a lot of children who enroll in school, both boys and girls, compared to Ghana, which is the graph above. But equally, the proportion of children who are learning, which is represented by the shaded portion on the graph, is still very low. It's almost the same as in Ghana. So what these two graphs are saying is that even with systems that are able to keep children in school, learning loss is as much as children which are as much as schools where children are not able to stay in school for longer. So we do have a big challenge, and this is what we need to be reminded of as we move forward. Shall we move to the next slide? And the thing is, as I've said, COVID would worsen this picture of wealth disparities and learning outcomes. This is a study that shows that as children get older, the gap between the wealthiest and the poorest widens in terms of their learning outcomes. And this graph can also be seen in the light of the grades. As you move across the grades, that gap widens. Now, I presented this and the previous graph just to give us the background that before COVID struck, this is what we were trying to address, trying to ensure that disadvantaged children are able to close the learning gap and supporting teachers to provide quality education for all, as we want to see in SDG 4. The long and short of the story is that COVID has made this situation much more challenging. And I think that if we think teachers will go back to business as usual, I'm afraid that the loss would not be, that gap would not be closed unless we begin to think much more creatively and imaginatively in supporting teachers. And I think this is a message that we need to bring before governments, before ministries of education, to point out that teachers would need support. If they're going to address this problem, teachers would need to be given all the support that they need to deliver and ensure that the learning gaps are closed. Next slide. So, on to my final slide. Now, what do I see as teachers' role in meeting the learning needs of all? I think that reopening schools should be more than upgrading physical infrastructure to support safe return to school. It's very important that we do that. The hardware considerations are important, and a lot of effort has gone in to make sure that schools are safe. But I think equally, to reap the benefits of these changes, we need to make sure the software issues are addressed. And I think this relates especially to teachers. So the point I'm making is that providing safe learning environments for all is important. I don't think we can doubt that. It's very important. If teachers have to feel safe, children have to feel safe and to learn. That has to be an important point. But we also need to think about how teachers can address the widening learning gap as a result of COVID-19. And this is the import of my message, is that when children return to school, teachers are going to be faced with a very different set of situations as far as learning is concerned. And I think if they operate business as usual, I don't think that they can address those problems. So what I'm proposing are three things. One is that we should look at teacher professional development, use teacher professional development to address three main areas. One, I think we should be thinking of how we can train teachers to identify the silently excluded child, children who are at risk of dropping out. How do teachers identify and support them? And I think if I'm a teacher and school reopens, I have to be thinking, who has been most disadvantaged as a result of COVID? How do I identify those who have been most disadvantaged? And how do I help them? And I think this has to be a very important message in terms of the professional development. Secondly, we have to close this gap rapidly. And there's been a lot of work done on as related learning pedagogies. And I think we need to use professional development to equip teachers with the skills that can help them to close the gap within a short period of time. And there are a lot of studies that show how this can be done. And that the professional learning, professional development effort should go into doing that. And then thirdly, I think that we have to be also thinking about socio-emotional support for teachers, because teachers are going to be faced with, if we thought that they had challenges before COVID, this is going to be double or triple the challenges they'll face. They may have a lot of disruptions in class because some children fall late. The teachers themselves may not be able to attend regularly. So we need to be thinking, how do we support teachers emotionally? Teachers also have families. They have to deal with their own situation at home and in the community. So we need to think much more holistically in terms of how we can support teachers and the best way to do that. So let me end by saying that when we're thinking about the role of teachers in meeting the learning needs of all children, we need to be able to be clear. We need to be clear about what the challenge is. Apart from the fact that we need to create these safe learning environments, we need to be clear that the problem is that we have a worsening learning gap between the advantage and disadvantage. And we need to equip teachers to be able to address that, provide support for them to do that. And I hope that this your conference would provide opportunity to learn from practices that are working, and also give policymakers some advice on how they can support teachers to be able to meet the aspirations that governments have about improving quality education for all in a post-COVID world. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kwame Champon. This was really a very well organized discourse for the reopening. From the, I could feel your professional and also very sympathetic attitude towards the teachers. Absolutely, you are absolutely right that we cannot restart the schools as it was before, and teachers must be well supported, and then their professional development to look at at-risk students, and also continue professional development, and also social-emotional support for the teachers. Thank you very much for this. I am really touched by your attitude and your thinking, which is so much accompanying teachers. Thank you very much. So this sets a very nice tone for the next 4 speakers coming from Uganda and Malawi, as well as South Africa. I'm wondering, Mr. Ishmael Mulindwa, are you on board? Bernard, I think he's having a traveler in connecting, right? Bernard?
Yumiko, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I haven't been in touch. I sent them an email, but I am not seeing any response from Mr.
Okay.
Ismail Mourinho.
So,
Maybe we can proceed to Mr. Baguma Filibert. I can see he's there.
okay, that's perfect. So, Mr. Philbert Baguma from Uganda Teachers Union Secretary General, would you be ready to go and speak on a teacher preparation for school reopening in Uganda from a teachers union perspective? I think it connects very well with the keynote by Professor. So, Mr. Philbert, you have 10 minutes. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Yumiko. This is a presentation from Philbert, the General Secretary, Uganda National Teachers Union. You can go to the next slide. This preparation needs to look at the key issues that need to be considered. And I have highlighted the key issues under 5 areas. That is teacher needs, teacher safety, teacher well-being, teacher readiness, and then teacher mental health. Let's proceed. Under teacher needs, I am looking at the area. The facts are that schools cannot remain closed forever. And what does that mean? Currently, some countries are faced with the challenge of balancing the health concerns brought about by COVID-19 and the socio-economic repercussions of keeping schools closed. Here in Uganda, we have a number of girl children who have been impregnated. We have those who have been married off. And we have domestic violence. And therefore, all these force us to reopen schools. But as countries consider full or partial reopening of schools, it is important to consider teacher needs, as they are the drivers of the education system. Government planners and policymakers cannot adequately consider the teachers' needs while working in isolation. The voices of the teachers must be heard in the policy and planning process for reopening. I recommend that the teachers, through their representative labor unions, must be actively involved in the planning and decision-making processes for school reopening. Next slide. Let's look at teacher safety. When you look at that picture, you will look at the innocent learners and the teacher. Here in Uganda, just on 20th September 2020, His Excellency, the President of Uganda, announced that schools in Uganda will reopen on 15th October 2020 for finalists and candidate classes. This declaration has stirred anxiety, fear, and panic in some of the teachers who are constantly asking Uganda National Teachers Union. And the question is, are we safe? As UNATU, we previously issued proposed guidelines to government that must be considered before school reopening to safeguard the lives of the learners, teachers, the entire school community, and parents. We are not yet convinced that the required preparation has been done, and therefore our teachers remain at risk. The recommendation here is that countries must take steps to reassure teachers that the school environment is safe for their return, or else many will not report back over concerns for their health and safety. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this is about teacher well-being. When you look at the teacher and the learners, the innocent learners, this time round, we shall not have this situation because of social distancing, physical distancing. And we are looking at all capitation and other school grants must be fully paid to enable schools operate as required. In the new normal, we have to have more than we have been getting to facilitate the implementation of standard operating procedures. A deliberate school feeding strategy must be in place to ensure that learners and teachers are well fed and nourished. School feeding remains a big challenge in most of our institutions. And under COVID-19, the situation may be worse if this is not rectified. Beyond timely payment of salaries, government should consider provision of personal protective equipment for teachers working under the current risk situation, as is the case with the health workers. Teachers are the frontline workers in education sector and should be protected accordingly for the daily risk. More teachers should be recruited to avoid stress emerging from the burnout and work overload as teachers try to make up for the lost time within the given time frame. You will realize that there will be need to condense the content. Teacher readiness to handle the task ahead. You can see the teacher and the child, and now if we look at the time remaining and the content, we may not give attention to these learners, and therefore the teachers need to be prepared. Besides health and safety, another concern raised by teachers is the lack of adequate preparation on how to recover the lost time and best support their learners. Their question is, where do we start from? We have been having radio lessons, TV lessons, printed self-study materials, but these have not reached everybody. We don't have a mechanism to know who has been attending and who has not. So the question is, where will the teachers start from? Teachers are afraid that as is the common practice, they will be issued with a revised school calendar with exam dates, given a reporting date, and left to work out the learning recovery process on their own. Countries must support teachers by finding ways of addressing their concerns, such as, how will I finish the syllabus? How will I manage within the given time frame? Will all the resources I need be available in time? If I am not able to complete the syllabus on time, will I be penalized under the new normal? What if the candidates do not perform as expected? Will I be blamed? All these are roaming questions. Next slide. Teacher mental health. And we are saying mental health is just as important as physical health. Teachers, most of whom are parents and have the same worries and concerns for the safety and well-being of their children as schools reopen, also have an additional responsibility to offer the much needed psychosocial support to learners as they return to school. Most learners are genuinely struggling psychologically due to the disruptions brought by the pandemic. They are worried about their safety, being able to catch up with the learning after a long absence, whether or not they will have their old routine back. Some are even considering not returning to school. What if COVID-19 positive case is identified among the learners? Are teachers trained and supported enough to manage the panic that could ensue among the learners. As schools plan for reopening, it is imperative that we consider the mental health needs of the teachers to enable them thrive in the new normal era. Next slide. Final thoughts. It is important that all countries anticipate a reopening of the education process. However, any plans to reopen should not be made in isolation by government and other policymakers if we are to safeguard the lives of the learners, teachers, the entire school community, parents or guardians, and the particular communities where the children hail from. We put the entire country at risk if all education stakeholders, particularly the teachers, are not involved in a mutual agreement with the government on guidelines and procedures for reopening. I want to thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Philbert.
You're welcome.
So, Yumiko, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. Philbert. Your presentation echoed very well with Professor Kwame Achampon's keynote on look at the needs of the teachers, and we must be prepared, and we must make the schools a safe and a secure place for teachers and as well as children, communities, parents, and guardians have to work together. Your message is very well taken. Now, thank you very much indeed. Please stay with us for the question sessions. Now, I am going to invite Mr. Charles Kumuchenga, Secretary General of the Teachers Union of Malawi, to present the perspectives from Malawi. Mr. Charles Kumuchenga, are you ready? Yes, please go ahead. You have 10 minutes.
Hello. All right. Sorry, I should indicate that I will speak on behalf of Mr. Kunchenga, who is also attending another very important meeting. Hello.
Yes. Could you introduce yourself? What is your name?
All right. I'm Pirilani Kamaliza. I'm working as a programs coordinator for Teachers Union of Malawi. Greetings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kamaliza. Go ahead.
All right. Can you? Yeah. Thank you very much. As a background, our government had announced the need to reopen the schools on the 7th September. I mean, it's the COVID-19 pandemic, but it was like a partial reopening because not all classes were taught to return, but only upper classes. That's standard 8 and Form 4. Those are the examination classes for primary and secondary respectively, and also as teachers union, we were a member of the national task force, which was commissioned by the government to set guidelines for safe school reopening. So we also did our submission to the task force on our perspective, what needs to be addressed to ensure the safety of both the teachers and also the learners. Can you go to the next? Yeah. So since the schools were reopened on 7th to date, and actually I should also mention that we expect that the rest of the classes shall resume on 12th October. That's when, depending on what has, on how the first phase has been, the government is yet to confirm to us whether all the classes are resuming on 12th of October. So we're yet to get that confirmation from the government. But so far, so good. In our schools, lessons are progressing smoothly, and we haven't received any case of a teacher or a student who has been infected. And of course, in general, as a country, we have there has been a tremendous decline on the number of newly infection cases of COVID so far, even including the death cases have also tremendously reduced. So far so good. And also school governing structures were tasked to take lead in monitoring adherence to set COVID regulations in the school. So the mother support group, the PTAs, the SMCs have really taken a role in ensuring that such guidelines are being adhered to. And also, as TUM, one of the issue which we had raised to the task force was to ensure that PPEs are provided to especially to the teachers, but as well as to students themselves. So the government had trained mother support groups in the schools to produce reusable face masks for both the teachers and the students, and also dissemination of COVID information through posters within the schools. We're also seeing in most of the schools to ensure that even learners are conversant with what they have to do in order not to be infected. But despite smooth progress of these lessons currently, there are some challenges which we have observed during this period, and also some anticipated challenges upon fully opening on come to 12th of October. One, I think, is what our comrade from Uganda has also shared, the observation of social distance, 1 meter distance, not fully being practiced in schools. You can assume, because now it's only one standard 8 which has resumed. So the classes have been they are taking advantage of the vacancies which are there or the presence of the classes for the other classes to divide the classes into a number of them, but still the issue of observing the 1 meter social distance has been a problem especially among the students, and also teachers failing to adapt to the newly instructed teaching methodologies amid COVID. Still, because they are using the same teacher's guide, the same books. Sometimes the text, the manuals instruct them to ask students to be in groups, for example, and then the issue of having a 1 meter social distance within the group, that's hard to observe. So still you find that teachers are still restricting themselves to the standardized methodologies as depicted as instructed in the user manuals when delivering their lesson. But also sometimes the difficulties which are there, because most of the, I can say 99% of the face masks being used by the students and the teachers are locally made, and that being the fact, sometimes you could find that the face masks will also pose a challenge in terms of delivering the lesson because of the way they are produced. And also in most of the schools, the issues of availability of water and the hand washing facilities were also a bit were not adequate. So that also posed a challenge or a risk to both teachers and learners, and also the issue of accessing potable water in the school. Most of the schools do not have boreholes, and they have to use boreholes from the communities, and also sometimes that ignited some conflicts between the schools and the people from the communities as a result of the schools using their water facilities. Overcrowded classrooms, these are some of the anticipated challenges which we foresee now upon full school opening. Though that schools are being encouraged, for example, to make sure that overcrowded classrooms are not there, they should teach outside the classroom, but we are approaching towards learning season as of now. So for sure, we are likely to face this challenge because having a classroom outside having a class outside classroom while it's learning, it's not possible. So the issue of overcrowded classroom will also be there because of shortage of shortage of school infrastructures, and also for lower classes, especially in standard 1 and standard 2, considering the way our curriculum is designed, and the teachers in face masks, and the word pronunciation and the like will also be a bit difficult with our teachers, especially in handling students from lower classes. We have even observed with these students from the upper classes being not able to use even the masks correctly, and then we expect this to be worse when it comes to dealing with students in the lower classes, and also being able to handle students with special needs. Teachers were not, our teachers are not prepared, or were not trained on how to handle these students now amid this COVID situation. Yeah, so I think briefly that's what I can share from Malawi as related to the current experience which we have observed during this partial school opening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kamalenga. I learned a lot from you on the situation in Malawi, where a lot of challenges remain. But it is very good that the Teachers Union of Malawi is cognizant of all the challenges, and the challenges you shared, in fact, like a social distancing and face masks in schools, is really a shared challenge of all the countries in Africa and beyond. So thank you very much for your excellent presentation. Now, I am going to ask South Africa, Mr. Prudence Mujambere, an educator and head of life science subject and member of the school COVID-19 committee at John Ross College in KwaZulu-Natal. Mr. Prudence, are you ready? If so, you have 10 minutes. Do you have a presentation to make to use, or would you talk?
So the presentation is uploaded, Yumiko. I can see the presentation.
Okay.
So maybe we can ask him to Prudence. If you can hear us, can you unmute the microphone and they start presenting?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes. I'm Prudence Mujambere. I'm going to share my experience as a teacher in a high school in South Africa, and precisely in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. It's one of the provinces that was hard hit by this coronavirus. A school where I work is a school in town, so when I share my experience, it will be in that context, because you find schools in town, you find schools in the rural areas, and those schools might have different ways of dealing with this pandemic, or they might have different challenges. As a teacher, let me start from maybe because it's in a school. How do we see these children in the morning when they come to school? The greetings. The greeting, we now advise the learners not to shake hands or hugging. That is encouraged. and we motivate them to just wave their hand, elbow bumps or foot shake, but not hugging, not shaking hands. That is how we are greeting now. Now we managed to establish safe classroom arrangement, and also they have been upgrading of our infrastructure. This is what we have done. For instance, there are some workers, not the teaching staff, but the front office and the other workers with pre-existing medical conditions. There, we needed to set up offices to accommodate them because some of them may not be able to work from home. They are needed at school, but then they can't be exposed. Yes, we set up offices for them, specifically for them, where they can work and at the same time protected. These also include pregnant staff. They were also given their offices so that they can be protected to prevent the infection. Also, before the school start, before we even receive any learner, we set up isolation rooms because should there be any learner presenting symptoms of COVID, we need to isolate the learner and call the parent, and then also call the nearest health facility for help. But that learner, but it hasn't happened yet, though. But if it was to happen, then we would take the learner to the isolation room that is already set up in school. We implemented COVID prevention guidelines, the guideline that we are following, but our approach is not the one of discipline and sort of policy. It's educational. We engage learners. We explain to them what the coronavirus is all about, and then to motivate them to buy in and then follow these guidelines. So we are not taking it as a learner would be punished because for maybe not wearing a mask properly. Instead, the learner is educated further. Now, this is how our day starts in school. Right there at the gate, because now there are certain problems linked to transport, how the learners are transported from home to school. But that one, we cannot deal with that one because some are using public transport, others are just dropped by their parents. So the issue of transport, we really have too little to do with that, but the Department of Transport deals with that, with instruction given and the guidelines given to the drivers. But then at the gate of the school, everyone entering the school is wearing a cloth mask at all times. There is no one who can be allowed in school without a cloth mask. Some learners might not be able to afford a mask. Now the government has given every child a mask to use, 3 masks, and even the teachers were given some. We were given some masks to use. So everyone, even if a child comes to school, we see a child at the gate without a mask, we can still provide mask to protect the child. Again, as they enter, everyone is screened. The temperature is measured, their hands are sanitized, and it's the government that provided us with hand sanitizers to all the schools. Now, there is also a form to report any COVID-19 related symptoms. because if a person comes and present with certain symptoms that are related to the COVID-19, it is recorded and then shared with the health practitioners. Again, some changes that we had to do. All the passages around the school where the kids are walking has been marked to direct or facilitate the movement, so that if a group of kids going one direction, they can see where the line that they must follow. They always maintain a distance. We encourage to maintain a distance, but sometimes you find kids that are not really observing those guidelines. When we see that, we always have to educate and explain again until when we get the desired result. Now, in class, this is what we have done, because with this pandemic, we need social distancing. Now, some classes were too small to be able to arrange desk, workstation to have that 1.5 meter distance between the workstations. Now, we thought about it, and we followed a system where now we only alternate grades, because we have from now grade 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Grade 12 is doing exams. They are going to do their final exams. They are in school every time. But other grades are alternating. Like grade 9 and grade 11s, they come in 1 week. Grade 10 and grade 8, they come the other week. They are alternating. This helps us now to use only the bigger venues that we have in the school. We are able to use the bigger venues that we have in the school because other kids are still at home that time. But in the neighboring schools, they adopted another system where now every class that they have, let's say you have a class of grade 8, they divided by 2. The half of that class will come in this 1 week, another half will come in the following week, which means it's like running 2 schools in one. So when they get to their classes again, they find a teacher there ready for them. The teacher will sanitize their hands and provide now wipes to wipe their workstation. Strictly, there is no sharing of books, no sharing of stationery. They cannot share anything, and even the teacher cannot touch the books of the learners. Even when we are marking work, we collect work and we keep it safe for a day. And after 1 day, then the teacher can go and take the work and then start marking the work. There is a matter of curriculum adjustment and management. Now, due to this lockdown, although South Africa, I think we are among the people who started schools early, but in the middle, we had to close again. So everything that is done in consultation with teacher unions, other epidemiologists, government officials. So everything is by consultation, and we are also guided by the World Health Organization. They consult. Now, what happened for some grades, only grade 12, that is the matric that is finishing this year, they are studying the whole syllabus. The whole syllabus is examinable. But for other grades from grade 8 to grade 11, the annual teaching plan cannot be completed. So what is happening is now we trimmed the syllabus. Trimmed the syllabus and reorganized it again. They selected certain key areas that the teacher will focus on this year, and the rest they will be planned to carry it over for the next 3 years until 2023. We'll be looking at that. So this year we only consolidate on learning after this long break, and to build the foundation for starting from next year. If we hope things will be better than now. Assessment. The assessment also, we had to do some changes. Some of the exams that could be done initially will not be done this year. We will only assess on the work that is taught in class, not the work that a child is supposed to be doing according to the syllabus, but only the work that is done. For instance, if a school, some schools started later because of poor service delivery. So in that case, that school will not be able to cover the same content as the other schools have covered. So their assessment will be based on that context in which they have taught. Now, something that many presenters, the previous presenters spoke about, we are combining the contact in the class. We are print handout, because when that class comes in 1 week, on Friday, they take home some handout that they are going to be studying or to reinforce what they have studied in the class, or even some new work that they can do on their own. There is also mobile learning. The teachers have adopted the WhatsApp groups where they are always interacting with their kids. But this is challenging. This is challenging because I don't know if it is only here, but most of the teachers, although this connectivism, the theory of connectivism has been here for some time, I think a few teachers have really explored the teaching using this mobile technology, the mobile learning. So they only started mobile learning during this COVID-19. So it is a sort of trying and error, because now you'll find a teacher has never used this method of teaching, but now because of COVID, and you need to be with your kids online during that week where they are not in school, and it is challenging. Teachers are not prepared for that, and some even when they were training at university, I don't think they trained in using this kind of learning, blending the face-to-face contact in class with the mobile learning. So it is a challenge. Another challenge again is that even many learners, they have no access to internet or other means, other requirements that they can use for learning online or mobile learning. A child will come to your class and you ask, I didn't see you, what happened? The child will tell you, I don't have a cell phone. Actually, before COVID, there was one speaker who came to school motivating the matrix, if I remember very well, he was discouraging a matric to have cell phones because he argued that cell phones are disruptive. But now cell phones are being used. So it's a challenge. Also, when children take work home, these parents are not prepared. They are not prepared to facilitate the learning at home. They cannot assist their kids. Then a kid is left alone. Find a kid who came back has just written down everything you gave them in that handout, and you find out that this online and distance learning is actually not working. Sorry for that. It's actually not really producing the result that you can expect because it was only introduced without any preparation. Now, this pandemic comes with some psychological problems, social problems, many problems. They must be addressed. For instance, in a family, you may find a person who is positive in isolation, person in quarantine, a person who dies in a family, and the child attend the funeral. This might create a sort of stigma. A child is stigmatized because of lack of information or fake news, what I call fake news from the communities. And then you might, even if it is not practiced, a child himself or herself, before coming to school, we start thinking about what other kids are thinking now. In my family, this happens. Are they going to run away from me? What is going to happen? So this stigma is a big problem that now people must deal with or must be aware of when they reopen their schools. The only way to deal, one of the ways to deal with it is to educate the kids, give them, share with them correct knowledge about the pandemic so that they can use the knowledge now and understand. When they understand the pandemic, this stigma, I think, it will decrease the level of stigma and discrimination associated to the pandemic. So many fake news, so many misconceptions. I remember sometimes people used to say it is for a certain group of people, that is other people, not us. But these misconceptions, that is what the school must deal with. Actually, it is good that kids are coming to school at least where they can learn about the pandemic with correct knowledge. Another thing is a child is isolated. A child is at home. That child needs to be to be supported.
So can you hear me, Prudence?
Yes.
Yeah, can you wrap up in the next 1 minute, please?
Yes, please. Yes. Okay. And another issue is now the violence, exploitation, and the gender-based violence. With kids staying at home, this is a big issue, and people who open their schools must be aware of that. When they see children who are presenting some sign of this kind of things, they must be prepared to help them. Thank you very much. Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Prudence, for the presentation, and you know, you highlighted very sharing your experience in South Africa, what have happened in when South Africa reopened schools. Then later on, they had to kind of close schools again. So, and we probably move to the questions that have been asked in the panel. And so the first question is addressed to all panelists, and I think it's a question asked by Saliu. To what extent are parents involved in the school reopening process in your various countries? So let's start with Filbert. Filbert, can you hear me? Filbert?
Yes, please.
So did you hear the question?
Come again.
Okay, the question is, to what extent are parents involved in the school reopening process in your country?
Unfortunately, in Uganda, we don't have any association that brings together the parents. And as a result, we find it difficult to coordinate them. And therefore, once in a while, they get a parent, but this parent does not represent the voices of the other parents in a coordinated way, because the person comes as an individual and maybe some of the issues the parent shares with others. So there is no coordinated kind of parents association to involve them at the
All right, so Filbert, yeah, okay. So Filbert, have you finished answering the question?
Yes, I was saying we don't have a coordinated way of bringing together all the parents because they don't have any association in the country.
All right. Okay, great. So is it Pirirani in the webinar? Pirirani from Malawi. And Mr. Okay, feedback. Yeah. Prudence, can you answer? Can you address that question as well?
Yes. For us, every school has a school governing body, and that school governing body represents parent. So in all these preparations that school governing body is involved, also the government has been consulting with the association of the school governing bodies. Also, when I see how the kids come to school prepared, I think that is also involvement, because they are sending their children to school prepared to learn. So I can say they have been involved in their specific schools, as school governing body, setting up the schools. Parents are involved. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Prudence. So I have to let participants know that Professor Kwame Akuponge has left the the webinar. But if there's any question, it will not probably be answered. But we move to the next question and see. So the second question is also addressed to all speakers or panelists. Are teachers' needs communicated to the ministries of education or relevant government departments? Maybe we start with Filbert again.
Yes, for us as Uganda National Teachers Union, far back in the month of May, we penned down our concerns and what we feel should be done before reopening the schools. And this was submitted to the Ministry of Education and Sports. And they got back an indication that they got the information. And from that, that's when we started consultations and engagements on the issues that affect the teachers. But of course, there are some instances where decisions are made without involving us. But to some extent, we do communicate the concerns of the teachers to the government.
So yeah, Prudence, maybe you can address that question as well. Prudence?
Yes. Here in South Africa, we have very, very strong unions. Actually, they are consulted, and even in every school, the unions, they've got their representatives. Everything that is done, whether it is checking how the classrooms are set up, checking if the PPEs are okay, the unions are always represented. And even for the reopening of the school, there's nothing that is done without involving teachers' unions. Yes, they are very much involved, yes.
All right.
So teachers are represented, yes.
Yeah, maybe the next question also come to you, Prudence.
Yes.
The question is, you highlighted something about South Africa reopening schools, then closing schools again, and they probably reopened afterward. Can you tell us what happened, the experience that happened that led to closing schools again and then reopening afterwards?
Yes, and this might happen again because it all works with the epidemiology of this COVID-19. If the epidemiology says that there is outbreak, for instance, that time when we closed again, it was at its peak. And that is where even the unions then got involved and say, the science is saying that the COVID-19 is at its peak in South Africa. How can we be opening the school? So, and then the president announced that we must close for I think it was 3 weeks. Then after that, we reopened again to close, so that because the closing of the school to limit the movement of people and children. Yeah.
Okay, so when in many countries, when you look countries that are thinking about reopening, and some countries that have reopened, they have experienced the spike of COVID-19 transmission, which was associated to schools or school students. Has there been any similar experience in South Africa or similar cases in South Africa?
I heard of a case in another province, Eastern Cape province, where in a school there have been some like 50 learners who contracted this virus in their school because of poor sanitation. But in our schools and in neighboring schools, that has not happened. So I heard that in a province, South Africa.
All right. Thank you so much, Prudence. And the next question was also addressed probably to all of the panelists. It was how should we deal with stigma against infected teachers and students? And say in some countries, in some cases in Europe and Asia, school bullying was observed. So I think, Prudence, in your presentation, you highlighted also to deal with stigma, you highlighted the need to share accurate information. Maybe Philbert, can you tell us if there are any other measures probably that are being taken in Uganda to to address the issue, the potential stigma?
You will realize that in Uganda, the pronouncement to reopen schools was 2 days ago. It was on 20th. And therefore, as we talk now, the schools are still closed. They are only opening on 15th of October. And we haven't engaged in those other activities. It must be part of the preparation so that the teachers are prepared, the learners are prepared, and the parents and guardians as well, so that we don't have commotions in the education institutions.
All right. So, Prudence, anything to add on how stigma is dealt with in South Africa?
Everything we have done, it's about educating and also observing the guidelines from the World Health Organization, the scientific guidelines that we have. Once you do that and you follow the guidelines from science and you apply that, if they say a person who is infected or who has been in contact with a positive person, what you must do, if you do that properly and followed by education, then it can decrease that level of stigma. People will not have that stigma. People will, the fear will also decrease. And yeah.
All right. Okay, so the next question probably come to both of you as well. Is how are the schools connected to the health facilities? Is there any way, any specific way the schools are connected to health facilities so that there's a quick follow-up in case there's a COVID-19 issues in schools in both Uganda or South Africa? So we can start with Philbert.
Part of the standard operating procedures which were issued by the Ministry of Health in Uganda was that every school or education institution will have a trained and qualified medical personnel attached to the institution, so that this trained personnel will handle issues of health and support the teachers in managing the situation under the new normal. And therefore, we are yet to see how it will work. We are yet to see whether we shall get enough qualified personnel per education institution, or whether they will be attaching a number of education institutions to one qualified person so that there is continuous monitoring. Like I told you earlier, because we have not opened the schools, it is difficult to tell how it will work.
All right, thank you, Philbert. And the Prudence, I'm going to ask you a different question that was also in the chat room. So would you elaborate a little bit? Would you explain on how neighboring schools share students on alternative weeks work? Would you explain how that process of sharing students among neighboring schools work in South Africa?
I don't think sharing student.
Yeah, so question, please speak a little bit more about point about neighboring schools sharing students on alternative weeks.
Okay. I meant to say schools in our neighborhood, in our areas. So what they do, let's say you have let's say you have now grade 8 to 12, and each class used to have 40 learners, let's say that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you do, you are going to have 20 learners in each grade now. Grade 8, 20 learners up to grade 11. Now, those 20 learners, this week, they are attending. They are coming to school. The other half is at home.
Mm-hmm.
Then that other half next week, that other half will come in when those who were here this week will be at home. This is to help with regard to that social distancing in classrooms, because some of the desks have been removed.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for that clarification of the question. It's clear. And the next question is related to that as well. So what happened with the half that is staying at school, at home? So is there any, do they benefit from more distance learning?
Yes, I think I addressed that one. Yes. When on Friday, every Friday, the kids go home with a handout that we give them to deal with. Most of the time in the contact, they no longer get much time to do exercises, activities in those learning areas where we need to do that. So most of it is done during that week. And then the teacher is using now the mobile technology, most of the time to WhatsApp, to interact with them, to see how they are doing, how far they are going. But then that is where I see many of them are not using that mobile learning or even the communication. Find a child who comes back to school without having interacted at all. Yes.
All right, thank you, Prudence. We move to the final question before we wrap up as we're getting closer to the end of this webinar. So I'm addressing this question probably to, I don't know if it is even addressed to Philbert, but Philbert, you are the Secretary General of Teachers Union. The question was saying, is there any country that has retained its teachers? And if so, how were they conducted? I don't know if you will be able to answer that question.
Is there
any country that has retained its teachers? If so, how were they conducted?
They are talking about a country that has retained the teachers.
Yeah, that's what I can see on the question.
Of course, those in public schools.
Retrained. They wanted to know if that.
Retrained. I think that is going to be part of the process of reopening schools and education institutions, because we all know that we are going to deal with the new normal. And therefore, under the new normal, the teachers ought to be retrained, reskilled, and retooled so that they can fit within the new arrangement. The learners have been away for quite some time, and therefore the behavior, the attitude will come changed. And therefore the teachers will need that capacity building, that professional development, so that they are able to manage within the limited time we have, and the revised school calendars, revised curricula, and all that. So there is a need for that. But as of now, I don't know of any country that has done the retraining.
All right. Thank you so much, Philbert. And thank
Welcome.
you so much, Prudence, and so many thanks to Professor Kwame and also Irilani, who presented on behalf of Charles from Malawi. So I can see that some resources this is a kind of communication to all participants. There are common sources to other webinars which have been shared in the chat room. And I can see that Yumiko, you are here. So if you can have ending remarks to this webinar, Yumiko.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you very much for able chair, and also Mr. Filbert, Mr. Charles, Mr. Kamalinga, and Mr. Prudence. Thank you very much for your excellent input. I think reopening schools, we find it a lot more challenging even than school closure. So we thought exchange of opinions and ideas would be helpful. I can hear some people. Can you mute the microphone? I promise to finish in half a minute. So this is the second webinar session on reopening schools, and I think it was very, very resourceful. And in starting with Professor Kwame's keynote, we would like to continue this reopening of the reopening webinar so that we have a more wisdom and tools and support for our teachers. So thank you very much for your participation to this important meeting. And please do visit ICWA website for more resources. And please tell your colleagues and friends to visit. And also, if you have good ideas for webinars on reopening schools and good experiences, promising approaches, please do let us know. So thank you very much. I wish you all a very good afternoon. Thank you very much. And thank you, Bernard. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you too. Bye.
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 Okay,
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.